Hi, good evening. Can you hear us? Okay, now that we fixed all the technological problems, we can get started. So thanks for joining our end of day session in this challenging hour. So we appreciate everyone that just came. I'm Sarah, this is Celia, and just while you were being seated here and we were fixing those issues, it made me think, when we end the conference and we get the statistics about the presence, how many attendees we're going to get in this, scores, and what's considered an attendee, right? Is it someone that was scanned when you just entered? Is this someone that stayed all the way through at the end? What about the people that signed up? We had over 100. Do they count or not? It's a bit tricky. You can see where I'm taking this. Like business logic can be tricky. And in the next 20, 30 minutes, we're going to walk you through the journey Bolt took to establish a governed source of truth for the metrics using Databricks and dbt and Looker, and how they leverage Euno's metadata management automations to implement this. But before we get started, first, why do we need to establish a governed source of truth in the first place? And I think the answer is quite straightforward in 2025. The reality of almost every data-driven, large-scale organization is the same. You get more and more requests from the business to get access to data. You have more and more business teams, building metrics, exploring data, building data products, building AI applications. And as you get more and more reports and metrics, you very quickly find yourself in a situation where you have a complete chaos in your business logic. And by chaos, I mean a clutter, a pile of reports and metrics it's almost impossible to control. You don't know who created them and when and for what purpose. Trust issues, serious trust issues with tons of inconsistencies and duplicates, leading data teams to spend more time disagreeing rather than deciding, right? And ultimately, the cost becomes higher and higher and higher.
And the business struggles, of course, and behind the scenes, that's us, the data team, struggling really badly. And actually, that's the root cause. We can't quite keep up with the maintenance and updates needed in our data sets if we have so many of them. So really what we need to do is kind of cut down on them and make sure that the ones that we do have, we're able to maintain.
Now, if we take a look at this simple example, which I think seems familiar to almost everyone that is part of a large-scale organization, you have those different dashboards reporting different numbers for the same metrics. That's the reality of organizations, really, because how they operate. It's a natural behavior. And if you think AI is going to solve you, well, I have bad news, it's not. You cannot rely on agents to figure out what's the right number for daily active users, because if you cannot explain your data to AI, AI will not just understand your data. If your people don't understand your data, you cannot expect your agents to just understand that. And that's really, I think, driving a sort of urgency to all of that. Everyone wants AI to work for analytics. We better start doing something to expedite the process. So I'm Sarah. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Euno. Euno is a metadata management platform that was built to help data teams strike the balance between the freedom business units need to access, to explore, to build data products, and the governance of central definitions and data models. A balance that becomes critical if you're looking to deploy AI for analytics and scale it. And our mission is to equip data teams with the tools they need to scale self-serve analytics and AI starting now. And I've been working with Celia in the past year or so since Bolt became a customer of Euno.
Yeah, I'm Celia. I'm a staff analytics engineer at Bolt, the European super app that makes cities better for people by offering ride-hailing, delivery, and rental services, much like Uber does on this side of the globe. And we are really big. We operate in more than 50 countries, and we have millions of customers. And my role in the company is to make sure that all the data that we generate and that we want to use, that we use it in a smart manner, that we don't make a mess out of it, that there's a system in place of like what kind of assets we want, what kind of assets we need, how do we create them, how do we maintain them. So that's my role in the company.
And sorry, I'm not used to this. In the past 2 years since we started running Euno, I spoke with over 400 data leaders from various companies, people like Celia. And we speak about data governance challenges, and guess what? They all share the same vision of having one central place to manage business logic. Ideally in the data layer. I mean, no one wants business logic to be trapped in the BI layer anymore, siloed there, right? And with the emergence of technologies like dbt, this vision becomes a reality, right? We have the technology and the standards to build an entire data model and all our metrics right within our warehouse in a governed and version controlled way. It's aligned, it's consistent, and it can be used and reused by various data tools, different users, and different AI applications. But while we have the technology to do that, I mean, it doesn't mean it solves the problem, because business logic doesn't bloom behind the scenes by data engineers. It's created by business analysts in the front line of the business as part of their day-to-day job in the tools that they prefer, like Looker, like Tableau. And we cannot stop that, because no one can slow down the business, right? They will find their workarounds. Trust them. I mean, if they will never wait for us. So what we actually need, though, is a way to tell the difference between what's exploratory, ad hoc analysis, experiments, tested analysts run, and our official definitions, the definitions that we can rely on. And that's what we call the governed semantic model. A way to provide consistent data interpretation, to map business intent to the right place in the data. It's super important if you want to scale self-serve analytics. It's critical for AI. It will just not work without it. And I think a common mistake is that, well, organizations, they want to scale AI and self-serve analytics in a trustworthy way. So they decide to establish a governed semantic model, but they think it's a one-off thing. I mean, we're going to do this huge refactoring process, build a central store for metrics, and from there on, everything is just going to work. But it's never the case. If you go with this approach, and months later, everything breaks, because you will have all those duplicates. And the faster way for an analyst to craft something is to, develop the calculation in their own workbook. So it's important to treat it as a continuous process. And let me quickly walk you through the different steps. You begin by establishing your central semantic model. But then when you have, and you don't have to cover everything. You can start domain by domain, step by step. But when you build your first set of metrics, you need to build the tool and the processes that enable users to actually find those metrics, understand the calculation, figure out how they can use them in their reports. Otherwise, they'll just do it their way and create those duplicates again and again and again. So they need a simple way to use it. But then as they start using it, new business questions come, things change all the time. They will need to either change a metric or develop a new metric. So they have to get the tools to contribute and keep evolving this business logic as they go. They need this freedom to evolve business logic, which, that finally brings me to governance. Data teams need the tools to track who's using those metrics. I mean, we invest so much engineering time in building this. If the organization is not using this eventually in reporting, there's no point. So to governing who's using what, and also when new terms are created and get traction, to add them to this governed semantic model on time. So that's the continuous process. And in the next part, I'm going to hand it over to Celia to walk you through how they implemented that at Bolt and went through these different steps.
Right. But when we talk about the building process, first of all, as a good engineer, before you build anything, you think through why you're building and what are your requirements? What do you have in mind as a goal? And in our case, the goal was, there were several. One of them was consistency. Clearly, we want the numbers we get from our data lake, from our BI tool, from our experimentation tooling, they have to match. And we have tried this for tens of years now, and data teams can only keep numbers consistent until they can no longer keep them consistent. So what we really wanted was a tool. Like, you have to enforce the consistency with a tool, otherwise it's never going to stay up to date. The second part is that we want to separate the two concerns of, one is maintaining your business logic, and the other part is using that business logic. And quite often what we used to do is we used to have a specific place where we needed to calculate the number, so we put the definition there and calculated the number. But we want to keep the definition and the actual calculation separately, because the calculation can happen in multiple places, and that's fine. The third part is about performance. I said we have millions of users, and that means billions of orders happening. We can't possibly just plug all of that into our BI tool and expect all the reporting to work on that seamlessly, really fast. It doesn't work. So we need to really think about the performance aspect of things, pre-calculate things to be efficient. And also, yes, of course, we want the usage insights. As we've said already, if we create something great but no one's using it, what's the point? So those are the kind of like the goals that we had in mind when we started designing our data model that would actually kind of comply with this governance logic, the continuous governance logic. And there are also some kind of fixed things behind there in terms of our data platform that we have already, because again, we're a big enough company that I can't just go to work and say, from tomorrow, we're gonna use this new perfect tool that does everything for us. No, we have existing systems, like thousands of assets, 15,000 dashboards already out there. So don't just say that tomorrow we're gonna switch over. So the tools that we are using that are already in our data platform, first of all, Databricks. This is our main query engine. And yes, it does offer a basic catalog for us, but it's basically just we can see what tables are there, so it's not much for us. And then the next important parts are dbt and Looker. And as tools, they probably don't need much introduction, but I really want to concentrate most of this presentation around how we use those two tools together. And I think that's where the value is, that we actually have figured out a way to make this work for us, because even though one day we might not be using Looker anymore, sure, but currently it's there and we need to support it. So that we really wanted to make it work for those two, and we found a way, and I'm sure there's 1,000 other ways you could do this much better. But again, current circumstances, and we wanted to make it work. And then we have another component here, which is Euno, that is the metadata platform that helps us actually bridge that gap in terms of like what we can't immediately get out of the box with dbt and Looker, and also acts as a kind of a catalog for us and to see the lineage and to do more that we can't quite do elsewhere at the moment. So now I'm going to go much, much deeper into the details of how this integration between our tools works. And I'd like you to think of a very, very basic use case that most businesses should be able to relate to. So you have your detailed fact table of orders. So you have orders happening. I think like most businesses have orders happening in some way or another. So let's say you have an order table, and on top of that order table, you will define some of your business metrics, things like revenue from those orders, maybe discounts on those orders, other things that might come up. And it's not only just that order table, you might also have an invoice table, you might have a customer support ticket table, whatever, like other business entities happening, business like events happening. So basically, dbt model, or many of them, and then on top of those dbt models, you can define metrics. And I want to stress that metrics are just calculation formulae. At this point, we're not calculating anything yet. So in dbt, we're defining our metrics in code. But the code is really black and white. It has to be like very strictly defined of like, this is how you calculate the metric. And then the next step is to use a concept that dbt has, which is called saved queries. And a saved query, again, is just a recipe. And it's a recipe to generate SQL code. But what you put in, what's your input to that recipe is the list of metrics that you want to have. So in this case, you might want to have your revenue and maybe cost and profitability and some metrics like this. And then for different saved queries, you can add a different group by. So your two inputs are a metric list and a group by list. And the group bys can be very different depending on your use case, depending on what kind of a table you want to create or what kind of a query you want to create. And a very simple example is that you might have your revenue and profit metrics for your markets, I don't know, cities, countries, regions, but you might also have your revenue and profit metrics for different customer segments. So you would have like a customer level or customer segment level query. And again, so far only a recipe, but then the next step that we do is we actually run that query, and we write the output to Databricks. In dbt Cloud, it's called exports, but we're on dbt Core, so we don't quite use the metrics and semantic layers exactly like they probably imagined this. Looker doesn't have any out-of-the-box integration to dbt metrics or dbt semantics. And we don't have those semantics anyway. So we're kind of using the metrics a bit differently. And here, this is the part where we already make sure that our metrics in one of those data marts and the other data mart, regardless of the granularity, we know that the underlying formula for the metric is the same. And this really gives us the consistency in those data marts. And the data marts are just aggregations on different aggregation levels. And quite often when we talk about aggregations, we mean really like low granularity, like very high level things, like maybe market level or monthly metrics or something like this. But in this context, it doesn't have to be low level. You can also create quite granular data sets. You can create a user level data set or driver level in our case. Those would still be like millions of rows in the table and still quite flexible. So here we have already our tables, pre-aggregated tables and original tables in the data lake. So now the next step is that we also want to make all of that available from Looker, our BI platform. So what we do as the first thing is we take that original detail table and the metrics defined on top of that, and we create views and explorers out of those so that they become available in Looker. So the metrics become measures in Looker. And we don't only do that because when we take the detailed table from Looker, we're going to be querying a very, very big table, so it's going to be quite slow. But we do still want it to be there because it covers many like corner cases, ad hoc cases, things that you can't predict. But the other part, we also create views and explorers out of the pre-aggregated tables, the MART models. And again, we create them with measures so that they can be aggregated further if needed in Looker, if it's possible. It depends a little bit on the metric type as well. And all of that LookML for the views and explorers, that's automatically generated with Euno. So we don't interfere there. That's always going to be there. And it's always going to be up to date with what we're doing in dbt. So if we're doing a change on dbt side, there will be a pull request on Looker side to create new LookML or to modify the LookML. So we know that it's always going to be consistent between the views and between the data lake and the Looker part of things. Now, Looker isn't really the only place where we use data from. There are obviously other use cases. And actually, Looker as a tool, they do acknowledge that there's other use cases. You want to access your own data. So in theory, if Looker was the only place, we could put all of our data model, the whole logic into LookML and just have it there. And Looker would actually even enable us to access that logic via the APIs and things that they offer for us to query the data. But at one point, when you scale, it stops making sense for you to grab every data use case goes through Looker. It doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense. It's way too costly, way too slow. So really, this is, again, a reason why we want things in Looker and in the data lake to be consistent.
So after establishing this foundation for metrics, even for just the first few dozens of metrics, the next question is how we allow users to discover and access and use those metrics in a simple way. And in Bolt's case, this means how do they find this dbt metric that suits their business question, and how do they figure out which Looker explorers they need to access in order to actually use this metric.
And actually, the first thing we did there was really not a technical thing. We just started with a lot of training and workshops to get used to thinking in terms of entities and metrics again, because as data teams, we are so used to thinking tables, columns, that it actually took us a while to get around to this thinking that, okay, if I define a revenue metric, I can actually define the metric, and that metric can be calculated for multiple different entities. You can calculate the revenue per user, per market, per driver, and so on. And this is something we actually had to remind ourselves that this is actually how the business works It's not tables and columns, it's entities and metrics. And then the other part, okay, for certain reasons, yes, we definitely need to create those tables in the data lake where we pre-calculate, where we have those metric values. But it's really important to understand the difference between a table and a table. One table is where you have the information. Another table is the aggregation table where you have pre-calculated some values for some convenient usage. And you really need to know which kind of table you're creating, and you really need to know which kind of table you're using or you should be using. So it's a matter of actually getting that understanding to be widespread in the company to remind yourself that, okay, this is what we're doing. These are the things that we're working with. So that's the first part, just literally education or reminder, actually. And yeah, I already said that everything that we have in DBT will be available in Looker. So we set that synchronization process up. There's actually more details on the what becomes what in Looker, how does it exactly work, different types of metrics and so on, that you can access behind the QR code. There's an article that explains the details there. But the fact that we have it available, as Sarah said, it doesn't mean that we know how to use it immediately. So now the next part, how do we use it? And I've given this quite a lot of thought. I think there are two kinds of data usage that can happen from Looker. One of them is when you are responsible of an entity. Let's say you're responsible of a market. Is my Eastern European region doing well or not? So I go to a market level Explore, and in that Explore, I can probably find multiple different metrics that are interesting. I can see how my market is doing. And Looker supports that use case perfectly well. You find that Explore, you do everything there. But I think there's another use case that isn't as well supported in Looker, and that's the use case. Let's say you're a product manager in Bolt. You might be responsible of the metric called driver online time. So we want our drivers to be online for longer periods, come online more often, and so on. So as a product manager, you need to do everything to drive that metric up. So now you want to know everything about that metric. But how do you know which Explorer to go to in Looker? You start probably from some high-level thing, but then you want to deep dive. And you might need to switch between different Explorers because those Explorers might be, one is fast for quick analysis on market level, but another one has much more detail for you. The thing is, Looker doesn't really think like that. Looker doesn't think metrics first, it thinks Explorers first. If you want to find any content in Looker, you need to find an Explorer. You go into that Explorer, and then you can start exploring the data. But actually, the way our business, the product manager would think, is more in terms of the metrics, and then how do you want to slice that metric? And that's also how DBT metrics think. There are metrics, and there are things that you can slice them by. So unfortunately, Looker doesn't really support it out of the box very easily. And actually, I think the desired flow for that product manager is that they have a business question. They go into a glossary, find a metric. That metric has very clear information on it on how or where you can access the numbers for that metric. And then you find that specific Explorer. Maybe you find another Explorer that also has that number. And then you use it. And what's really, really important here is that if you're able to find that Explorer, you're actually going to use this one instead of creating a new one. Because if you're not able to find where your metrics are, you're going to create another data set, build it up again and again and again, and then we have 50 different data sets showing us the driver online time. Happens. You can trust me, that does happen. So because we can't really offer that experience inside Looker, we've created another place where we can have that experience. So there is a metrics glossary, or kind of a metrics catalog in Euno, where you can search for metrics. And you also get all the information about that metric in terms of definition and whatnot, but also usage and certification information, is this a good metric to use? Where else does it get used? And so on. And what's also very convenient is that you can actually immediately go to those data assets where the metric has already been calculated, and you can immediately access that.
But I think the problem is that the reality is not so simple. I mean, you already have this legacy existing of the past 5-6 years in Looker, right?
Yes, we do.
So I mean, everyone knows that, right? We can build this elegant process. We're building the metrics in dbt. We're building the process to find them, to use them. But there is like, I call it the dark side of Looker, mounds of, measures, custom fields, SQL statements in derived use. I mean, all that exists there, and it's used in the top used dashboards of the company. And go figure. No one has the courage to delete this because they don't want to take the risk. And what we offer at Euno to try and help with this is usage intelligence. If you have visibility into everything that is created on the business side in Looker and how it's actually used on a column level, every dimension, every measure, every dashboard, every view, who's using this and how much, it helps you tell what's not used. Let's declutter it. It saves money. It keeps your environment clean. But the top used Looker measures are the natural candidate to join this governed semantic model, right? If you're able to identify conflicting definitions, then you can also let those other conflicting, owners know there is now an official new definition, start using that. If you have this column level end-to-end lineage, you can say, okay, these are the resources that used all those different definitions in Looker. Now we want to, kind of trace them to the new metric. So usage intelligence is key, and strong visibility to understand what needs to go to the semantic layer in the first place. And with this powerful visibility, it's not like analysts opening tickets, waiting for the data team to code things for them. No analyst will wait. And in fact, it's not practical. Who says what's the priority? But things that get traction and are highly used become a top priority for the engineering team to add to the semantic model. And going back to this workflow, those analysts start using those metrics and the legacy that they have, but they get new business questions, and now they figure out they want to change something. They want to create a new concept. We need to give them the tools to evolve business logic. And be able to contribute to the new metrics in dbt. But they're going to do this, with the tools that they like. They're going to, what they access on their day-to-day practice. So they need to be able to contribute through Looker.
Yeah, so we do keep in mind that our core model that we built up, we want to keep that really relevant over time. We want to keep updating that to the actual business. We've got an example where we changed the logic of how we assign rides to our drivers. So we completely created a very different dispatching logic, new tables behind the scenes. So that means also the business has to, our analytics teams have to keep up with that and create new metrics and new logic on top of this new business process that we just introduced. So some of these things, when we have already created our core logic, we've created our core metrics, we've made them available. So some of these things started happening in our company. The first one is that when we had a definition in black and white, literally in code, exposed everywhere, numbers visible everywhere, we started having questions like, is this even the right definition for this thing? And the best example we have is for a profitability metric. It has a lot of components. It's a derived metric. It has a lot of revenue components, a lot of cost components. And we started questioning whether this should be included or excluded. Should it be there? Should it not be there? So it's just the fact that a really widely used metric that no one had any idea of how this gets calculated, usually we put it in the core model. Now we know how it's calculated usually. Then the company started questioning oh, is that what we really meant here? Okay, so we're having these discussions okay, so maybe it should look a little bit different. And then the next thing came up, who has the final say? It's used all over the place. Everyone's using the metric. Out of these 100 people that we consider a data team, or maybe even related business teams, finance teams, whatever, who has the final say in saying, okay, this is what we want to consider our profitability in the usual use case? Of course, there's always going to be corner cases. Okay, in this context, we want to look at it differently. But in that case, we give it a different name and use it differently. But for the main case, okay, who needs to decide? Fine, we found that person. They're okay, I'll take the responsibility. This is what we're going to do. And the next thing is that we realized that we don't really have a process. Okay, someone decided to change a metric, or someone decided to fix a metric definition. How do we announce it? How long will we give people to like switch over? Like, how do we communicate? How do we do the process? Who does the update? Who does the backfill? You know, all of these questions actually like, oh, really? We always kind of manage our data model, but we never had a systematic process of how to manage that data model. So now we do have that. And the good thing is that with the way we've set up our data modeling is that we've kind of separated the business ownership and the technical ownership. So the business person who takes that responsibility can say, this is what I want to do with the metric definition. And then the technical owner, like an analytics engineer or data engineer, can come in and help them with the practicalities of regenerating the data mart codes, backfilling the data marts, or making sure that the updated definition is now available also in Looker. And in both sides, both persons, they're doing the work that they're best at. And this really helps us iterate much faster with our business logic, because business logic can be changed in one place, and then the technical owner can take over and make sure that it gets propagated all the way where it needs to be. And the other question that really came up is that when we move all of our logic into dbt, are we then locking out our Looker users from being able to contribute? And of course, we wanted the answer to be no. So we figured out a way how to really allow contributions around the core model. Because previously what we used to do is like, you need a new definition, you start from scratch. But now that we have that core model and core metrics and things available already, we want people to build on top of that, so they don't have to start from scratch. And building on top of something in Looker is called refining. So that's what we want to do. Actually, for every data asset that we automatically generate on Looker, we also create refinement files. And the refinement files are a specific place where we teach all of our business users to contribute. So if you want to add a new metric, or if you want to modify something, this is where you do it. And then over time, and actually that's kind of like the more detailed look into this of how we do this. On the left side, you have everything happening in dbt. That's what the data team takes care of. Your like sources, staging, core models, metrics, everything is there. Then we automatically generate the view files and explore files. The first files are rigid. You're not allowed to touch them. That's what the automation takes care of. And then on top of that, we have those refinement files, and these are the ones that are flexible. This is where you can put new logic. This is where you can add things. So we have this whole like system of things that where to put what. And when something gets added to the core model and it gets used a lot, then it's relatively easy to shift it from Looker to the dbt side, because it's already like it relies on the core, and it has a similar pattern of how you do things. So for those new things that we've added, we really want to see how they're doing. And obviously, if something gets widely used, it's a good candidate to be promoted into the core model. And we know that if it's widely used and everyone agrees on the definition, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, which ultimately brings us to the last element, which is governance. I mean, how can we have this foundation. We want to make sure our organization is actually using these metrics that we've built for them. Now, we built it, the design in the first place was designed for governance, right? But if no one's using it, you're back in square one. So we really needed the tools to monitor who is using what, who is using those governed metrics, and we're using Euno now to do that. So we went through step 1, step 2, step 3. We've built the metrics. Euno is syncing, I think, thousands of metrics and models today automatically between dbt and Looker, and they keep changing on a daily basis. And we have those refinements now auto-generated in explores, and analysts are beginning to use Euno to search and find them and use them. And we believe the more they will feel it's convenient and it's serving them, the more of the usage will transition to those governed metrics. And there are actually 2 ways to track that. One is, and that's something that is unique to Euno, you can define something like, what's a certified dashboard? A certified dashboard would be like an automated tag, and the definition can be only dashboards or reports or explores or looks that query upstream those DBT marts. If they're using different logic in Looker or a join in a custom SQL statement with a table in Databricks or whatever, that's fair, that's legit, that's not certified, or that's not AI ready, or whatever you choose, okay? So we have this new concept, and it's a live property, so if something changes, it changes automatically. So we can attribute this to every asset in LookML. The other way to monitor is to say, okay, let's track the usage patterns of these metrics. Let's show that we created them. No one used them in the beginning, but now they're used in a certain number of dashboards by this and these users and so on. And this is how it looks like. So, for example, here it's the list of top used dashboards that you can find in Euno, and with this, certified property dashboards that query only DBT marts, you can, for example, track the percentage of highly used dashboards that are certified. You would want to reach 80%, 90%, 100% if you're that good. But this can also help you prioritize your engineering efforts. If your top used dashboard is not certified, you know where you want your engineering power to be focused. So we don't need analysts to open tickets for you. It's there in these visibility tools. And another example for that, so we're now working on this metrics scorecard. I mean, which dashboards looks are using this metric, which users, we can look at this usage traction over time. So these are tools that we put in place right now in order to govern those metrics that we've established in the data layer.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, of course, not everything is governed. And we can't ever get there probably. But yeah, so again, summarizing, there's a cycle. You need to go through the cycle. It's always ongoing cycle. And I know there are many parts of this cycle that are not optimal at the moment. And of course, it creates a little bit of a barrier to contribute into our core model. But I think a core model is actually worth protecting a little bit. That's one thing. And also the other thing is that the fact that you have a system or some rules in place doesn't necessarily mean that it's more complicated to contribute, because if you're an analyst and you can do anything, like SQL lets you do anything, you need to actually think through, okay, what do I need to do? Where do I need to put it? How do I need to call it? And so on. But if you already have a system in place that tells you, if you want to create a pre-aggregated table, put it there, call it like this. If you want to define a new metric, put it there, do it like this, then click the sync button and so on. It actually kind of makes it easier to contribute. So yes, of course, there are inconvenient things in the system. There are also like the tooling isn't perfect, but we're getting started. We are already feeling the benefit of being able to consistently create the data marts. We're happy that we can consistently put in place some explorers in Looker. So we're winning already now.
Yes, and just, two last sentences to summarize this. I think, if there are two things I would want you to take away from this. So one, it's not a dichotomic world. It's not like freedom and wild, wild west and everyone does whatever they want, or governance and centralization. It's always both. And technologies like metadata management platforms can be leveraged to build a governance foundation in a constantly evolving space. That's really the premise of metadata. And finally, maybe the most important takeaway is get started now. Don't wait. It's true for metrics. It's even more important for AI. So many data leaders are afraid to get started. We're not ready. We need to refactor everything. We need to rebuild all our models. We need to resolve. You have the tools to get started. It's an iterative process. It's a gradual process. It takes time anyway. So don't be afraid to get started. And we'd love to speak with you. If you have questions, if you want to reach out to us, you can reach out on LinkedIn. You can schedule with us. We'd love to help reduce the fear and give you the courage you need to start now. And AI is coming, so why not get ready as fast as we can? We have maybe 30 seconds for questions, but we will stick around here for the next 15 minutes. So if you have something you want to speak with us right away, we will be here to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
And answer the survey.
Sorry?
Click one more time.
Yeah.
Don't forget.
Yeah. And we will explore the attendees list in the end, and we'll see what numbers they came up with, and we'll share it.
Yes. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.